A provocation. Move from point A to point B in as straight a line as possible, reconfiguring your body as necessary. Parkour is a movement practice and discipline that involves running, jumping, vaulting, swinging, and flipping around, across, and through obstacles as they are encountered in the urban landscape. Its practitioners navigate the city in unexpected and subversive ways, imagining new political possibilities of existence with their movement. Most parkour scholarship has discussed the practice in terms of its spatial, political, and philosophic dimensions as a self-contained metaphor and object, while little scholarship has looked to the cultural productions of parkour itself. As a dynamic and relatively young movement practice, parkour has evolved alongside the development of digital camera technologies and online social media, and as such has a rich media culture that reflects parkour's unique relationship to movement and urban space. As camera technologies have become smaller, lighter, mobile, and more affordable, the parkour community has leveraged these emerging technologies to create new assemblages of media, bodies, and urban architectures that are easily shared via online platforms such as Instagram and YouTube. How do these movements, visions, and technologies inform our perceptions of public life and public space? What implications do these apparatus hold for our understandings of these assemblages? Following Jacques Rancier's articulation of aesthetics as a, quote, mode of articulation between ways of doing and making, their corresponding forms of visibility, and possible ways of thinking about their relationships, end quote, I discuss the aesthetics of first-person, 360, and drone camera perspectives, as well as the editing practices and narrative trends of parkour media productions to offer a parkour subjectivity of the city, one that understands the city as dynamic, relational, material, in process, and embodied. For this video presentation, in the sake of length, I want to foreground the cultural media productions coming from the parkour community and the subjectivities and perspectives they suggest, and as such will not provide as much scholarly contextualization as in the written paper version. Cities, media, subjectivities. Urban space and representational media have had a long-standing relationship, from late 18th century panoramic paintings of London and early cinematic works like Dziga Vertov's Man with the Movie Camera, to Ridley Scott's future dystopian Los Angeles and Blade Runner, to newer digital social media genres of urban exploration and ambient urban walks. Representational media of cities has provided a rich analytic space for tracing the underlying concepts that shape the complex and interconnected processes that influence the formation of subjectivities of and within urban space and media. For example, in her seminal text Atlas of Emotion, Journeys in Art, Architecture, and Film, Giuliana Bruno describes how camera cinematography and early city travelogues reproduce the daily practices of being in public urban space, articulating how cinema as an architectural practice has been instrumental in shaping how we not only cognitively understand, but affectively experience urban space. This attention to subjectivities through the embodied experience of cinematic and technological representation is taken up by media scholar William Uricchio, who observes a series of representational trends in moving image depictions of the city to highlight not only, quote, what is stored in the various image systems under consideration, but also how cultural trends in urban representation can lead to insights into broader encounters between historical subjects and their self-fashioned environment, end quote. His analysis of panoramic painting and films, city symphonies, and the world of Sims emphasizes the specific historical, technological, and aesthetic affordances and contexts to offer an approach that, quote, encourages us to reflect upon a body of representation in terms of its metaphoric capacities, and offers a way to move beyond what is seen in order to consider a way of seeing or being in the world, end quote. By highlighting the specific affordances and frameworks of these representations, Uricchio also points to the production contexts out of which they emerge, suggesting that the embodiment of the production process must also be considered alongside its reception and viewing. Thus, in looking at parkour cultural media productions and its aesthetics, I consider both the embodied nature of production as well as reception to offer a parkour way of seeing or being in the world, a parkour subjectivity of the city. First person. First-person parkour shots are used to mimic the subjective experience of the camera operator as they move through the urban space, and indeed constitute a whole subgenre of parkour videos on their own. Through their movements, parkour practitioners understand urban space as both material and dynamic, an embodied perceptual process of unfolding. According to media semiotician Roberto Eugeni, the first-person shot represents a transformation of the classical point of view shot found within traditional audiovisual forms such as film and television. He argues that the first-person shot, quote, represents the sight of located, embodied, enworlded, active, dynamic, and hybrid agents, an intermedia figure directly exhibiting the dynamic grasp of the world, and consequently its perceptual, practical, emotional, living, and ongoing experience. First-person parkour shots are often captured via an action camera held in the mouth using a specially designed mouth mount, and are subject to haptic feedback of the body in motion, which emphasizes the phenomenological and embodied nature of both parkour and of the first-person perspective. The jostling and jiggles that result from the camera and mouth work towards what Alexander Galloway calls the subjective shot, a more volatile first-person perspective that mimics the physiology of human vision and more intimately places the viewer in the subjectivity of the camera operator. This subjective intimacy is further conveyed through the heavy breathing and grunting that results from the camera being held in the mouth as the body exerts physical effort, highlighting the material and embodied dimensions of how these shots are produced. In addition, though parkour is primarily understood as a physical sport and discipline, it also pushes its practitioners' mental limits, forcing confrontations with fear and other mental barriers. By mimicking the perspective of the parkour practitioner, first-person parkour shots showcase this aspect and can phenomenologically induce similar feelings of fear, particularly for videos that include parkour at height. Additionally, the position of the camera and mouth results in the fragmentation of the body. Various limbs come in and out of view, but the body of the camera operator is never seen in full. Other parkour bodies may come in and out of frame as they collectively traverse the landscape, though because bodies and environment are continuously in motion, they are dislocated and displaced. There is no situating within a specific location, site, or place, aside from what information is given in the video title and description, or what can be inferred from the footage. Space is not fixed, but rather the body and urban landscape work together to continuously and collectively recompose and reconstitute themselves through movement. 360 cameras. 360-degree cameras create pre-rendered spherical videos that are most often used for immersive virtual reality films and applications. In these videos and experiences, the camera position itself is largely fixed and unmoving, while the user changes their particular perspective and view by looking around using the head-mounted display. In 360 VR, the illusion of being there is solid. The world is stable and follows our expectations of its traditional video predecessors. These videos have traditionally been created using camera arrays that are bulky and expensive, requiring specialized knowledge and access to generate full spherical images. However, with the development and release of Action 360 videos such as GoPro Max and Insta360, 360 cameras and spherical videos have become much more financially accessible and physically mobile, allowing for more dynamic filmmaking. Because parkour media is most easily and often shared on online social video platforms such as YouTube and Instagram, 360 video is often remediated into more familiar video formats that can be viewed on traditional screen-based apparatuses. Editing 360 footage for screen allows media producers to make decisions about where and how the gaze is directed, as well as stylistic choices regarding the perspectival distortion that results from spherical video capture. Thus, unlike the immediacy of VR, which seeks to erase or deny any form of mediation, the use of 360 in parkour media reflects a hyper-awareness of the multiple layers of mediation involved in representing parkour, space, and movement, what Bolter and Grusin term a remediation of the self. While most discussions of 360 video focus on its VR applications, looking more closely at the visual content of remediated 360 parkour media reveals alternative implications for these assemblages of bodies, urban space, and media. As mentioned earlier, the development of action-based 360 cameras allow for greater camera mobility and movement, and due to the spherical nature of these shots, editing 360 video into screen-based formats often results in dynamically distorted and unfamiliar views. Rather than employing a static camera position where events happen around the camera, which has traditionally suggested a neutral subjectivity, in 360 parkour content, the camera often traverses the terrain with and in close proximity to the parkour practitioner, foregrounding the material, relational compositions of media, body, and space. Combined with the distortion of the remediated spherical video, parkour and parkour media render the body and landscape at unfamiliar orders of magnitude, continuously constructing the unfamiliar views of sight and body through motion and destabilizing conceptions of place and sight. For the viewer, then, 360 perspectives engender a continuous process of situating and attending to the relational dynamics between camera, body, and objects that constitute the urban space. Drones. The use of drones and aerial cameras in parkour media foregrounds the narrative of the body in motion, highlighting the relational nature of parkour as well as the non-normative movements and trajectories that the parkour body cuts across the landscape. Showcasing the transgressive paths within the broader urban context also points to the political dimensions of parkour, as parkour practitioners ally the prescribed paths of the built environment in favor of creative traversals that leverage overlooked architectural features in such a way that challenge notions of public and private space, and who is permitted to move through space and how. The smaller consumer microdrones and racing drones used in parkour media allow for greater maneuverability that result in dynamic perspectives of body and landscape. This is in contrast to the dominant contexts and discourses of aerial and drone aesthetics, which discuss the perspectives of larger macro drones in two different contexts. One, the sweeping aerial and panoramic shots of cinema used to establish a narrative setting and situate the viewer within the location, and two, the drone aesthetics of geopolitics, war, and surveillance. These discourses emphasize the role and impact of distance in aerial representation, which suggests a totalizing neutral and objective perspective from above that extends the scopic regimes of modernity, fixes its subjects, and establishes an asymmetrical power relation between the operator and viewing subject. At the same time, in their discussion of coronavirus pandemic drone videos, Patricia Zimmerman and Karen Kaplan observed that, quote, distance is relational and historical, end quote. In other words, distance is situated and is not only spatial, but temporal as well. Attending to the production context of drones in parkour media emphasize the situated and continuously relational nature of drone operator, site, and body in motion, foregrounding the collaborative compositions of parkour. The technological affordances of smaller drones also impact how these shots are produced, which holds additional implications for how we understand these elements together. Unlike the distant and personal views of cinema and drone warfare, which abstracts and depersonalizes, parkour drones operate at closer distances so that the primary focus is the body and how it moves across the site, moving between multiple scales of distance. Because of the prioritization of the body in motion, parkour also has a common cinematographic trope of the body not staying in frame or view. The body often enters and leaves the frame in a single shot, suggesting an inability to be completely contained by the camera's capture. Furthermore, the increased maneuverability of these smaller drones also means that the perspective and angle of a shot can dynamically change, emphasizing the multidimensionality of these compositions and the continuously relational nature of drone, body, and landscape all in motion together. Additionally, the drone operator must remain proximate to the drone itself. The operator is on site and on the ground, working in tandem with the parkour practitioner and landscape to create and capture the shot. In the particular context of parkour media productions, the drone operator is often a parkour practitioner themselves, and have an embodied understanding of the movements they work to capture and showcase. In short, these shots are often produced through an intricate collaborative choreography between the mover, the terrain, the drone, and the drone operator, disrupting the binary logics of us and them, here and there, machine and human found within dominant drone discourse, and suggesting a different, dynamic set of relations between the body, city, and camera. Editing practices and narrative trends. Turning to trends in editing practices and narrative frameworks, I want to highlight three aspects that reflect a parkour subjectivity of the city: a material and spatial attention to sight, an emphasis on process and progression, and fragmentations and recombinations of time and space. While most narratives of parkour describe its engagement with the environment as continuous free-flowing movement that spans the city, in practiced reality, modern parkour most often occurs in and at spots, architectural arrangements, and structures that lend themselves to parkour-style movement. Depending on one's capability and experience, these spots might range from configurations of ramps, rails, stairs, ledges, walls, etc., and parking lots and building entryways, to rooftops and alleyways, to sculptures and monuments, or maybe even something as simple as a curb. In parkour, a site's significance is demarcated not by its discursive specificity, i.e. the historical, political, and social factors, but rather through the specific configuration of elements, the material nature of features to its spatiality, distance, height, angle, etc., and the affordances of movement. This way of seeing and experiencing space is often called parkour vision. This way of seeing is reflected not only in the cinematography of parkour media productions, which are instrumental in new interpretations and subjectivities of the city, but also in the narrativizations of parkour and vlogs, whose creators draw attention to the specific material features and arrangements when introducing a spot, often expressing their excitement at the possibilities of movement.
We've been wanting to go to this spot for literally like years. I'm pretty fucking excited to actually get the chance to hit it up.
This is parkour heaven. All the way up there, tumbling down walls. This is just ridiculous. Like, this whole area is so long, wide, and just densely packed with walls. Spain, you're killing it!
Parkour media also emphasizes process, displaying and narrativizing affirmative relationships with fear and failure. One way this is shown is through edits that display the failed attempts that precede the successful take of particular movement challenges. Rather than hiding failures and only showing successes, failure is understood as a rich and essential part of parkour. Another common way of showcasing process is through narrativizing the process of constructing lines, which are sequences of parkour movements strung together in a spot intended to be completed in one take. These narratives describe the thought process of parkour practitioners as they move through the spot and identify what features and movements they are drawn to, as well as what aspects might make particular movements challenging or scary, articulating a localized material psychogeography.
Maybe something like that.
I'm just scared at the moment of just the foot placement and the fact that the bin's got like a hole in it. Like if I go to bounce it and my feet go too low, then I could like put my feet inside the bin and it would just end bad. But I've done it. I've done this before. I remember it being okay once I've done it. It's just really scary to commit to. So those are the things I'm working through in my head at the moment. But I think it's just a case of having a go, because I don't think I will bounce it. I think I'll be able to get on top pretty quickly. Why am I not doing it? It needs to happen on this go, because I'm getting myself scared now. Oh, that took far too long.
No, because it's not about that. Up, down, 180. Oh.
Parkour in its media productions also understands space and time as fragmented and recombinant. The process of creating lines in a spot continuously reorders space, as numerous sequences can be composed, combined, and modified in various ways according to the imagination and capabilities of the practitioner, and the different lines across a spot change the affective experience of the space. Additionally, while I have separated the apparatuses above for the sake of clarity and organization, the shots created by these apparatuses are often edited together to show parkour movement from multiple angles, foregrounding the elements of the urban landscape that often go unattended and offering a way to see sight and movement from many perspectives at once. Showcasing these movements from multiple perspectives also results in temporal fragmentation, as movements are repeatedly shown, often at varying speeds, disrupting any singular linear notion of time. These spatial and temporal fragmentations of parkour media acknowledge the mediated nature of vision and experience and extend post-Cartesian, post-perspectival, and post-cinematic modes of subjectivity. In sum, parkour has a rich media culture that reflects the practice's dynamic understandings of urban assemblages of bodies, space, and media. This video has discussed the use of newer camera technologies of first-person, 360, and drone apparatuses, as well as the editing practices and narrative trends found in parkour media productions to suggest a parkour subjectivity of the city, one that foregrounds an embodied, material, in-process, and relational experience of urban assemblages.